I always thought love would be loud, like laughter bouncing down hallways or people talking over each other just to be heard. I never expected it to whisper and still tear me apart. It was a Friday evening, that in-between time when the sun still clings to the sky but the hallway lights have already come on. I had just pulled Rachel into a hug, nothing dramatic, just that ordinary embrace people in love share without thinking, a pause in the day. I wasn't expecting anything beyond that simple closeness. But as I held her, I heard it, barely, slipped out in a breath she probably didn't mean to release. God, don't. My body froze. Everything inside me locked. Her body was stiff, barely pressing against mine, as if the contact itself was something she had to endure. Before I could even ask what was wrong, she turned and disappeared into the bedroom. No explanation, no eye contact. Like a shadow fleeing light, I didn't follow. I just stood there, arm half extended, hanging uselessly where she had been. Behind the closed door, all I could hear was the soft shifting of fabric. I lingered in the hallway longer than I care to admit, replaying the moment in my head, hoping I misheard, hoping it was nothing, just a breath, not words. But no matter how I twisted it, those two words stayed. God, don't. That wasn't confusion, affection, or stress from a long day. That was rejection. Resentment. Maybe something she'd been holding back, something I wasn't supposed to hear. I dropped my arm and turned to the wall where a photo hung in a cheap wooden frame. Us, Rachel and I, standing on a bluff 2 summers ago. Wind in her hair, sunlight spilling into the lens, her hand around my waist, face pressed to my shoulder, smiling like she had everything she ever wanted. I looked exhausted but proud, like a man who built a life with his own hands and thought it would last. Back then, I thought I was lucky, not fairytale lucky, just a man who found someone before the storm. That photo lied, or maybe we were both lying. Even then, I waited for her to come out, for the door to creak, for some clumsy excuse, a bad dream, a sore back, a stressful call. But the door never moved. Silence offered no explanation. I didn't knock or beg. I walked to the kitchen and leaned against the counter. One of her mugs was there, pale blue, chipped near the handle, half full of cold tea. The paper tag dangled off the side like some forgotten warning. I stared at it, thinking how something so ordinary could suddenly feel threatening. Who says something like that when their husband hugs them? I wanted to be furious. Really, I did. But what I felt was hollow, like opening the fridge expecting food and finding it empty. Rachel and I were never flashy. We weren't the couple friends envied or gushed over, but we had rhythm. I worked as a systems engineer for a regional airline, long shifts, deadlines, logistics. She ran a freelance design studio at home, boutique work for sustainable brands. Our life was neat. Grocery lists in the Notes app, color-coded calendars, laundry on Wednesdays, pizza on Fridays. Our relationship could have been laminated and posted on a fridge. Maybe that's why she flinched. Maybe she outgrew it. Maybe she outgrew me. What I couldn't shake wasn't the whisper or the hug. It was the way she turned and never looked back, not even a flicker of regret, as if the moment had been rehearsed a dozen times. That terrified me, because if it wasn't shock, if it was instinct, how long had she been hiding it? How many moments had I missed? I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I reached for her without second guessing. After that, I'd be reaching for the truth, not comfort. The next day, we didn't speak about it, not directly. We moved around each other like strangers in an airport terminal. Polite, distant, disconnected. She scrolled through her phone while sipping coffee. I packed my bag for work, pretending nothing had changed, though everything had. That weekend we went to our friend Greg's birthday party. Just a casual evening of drinks, board games, too much wine. I wasn't in the mood, but we went. Rachel came alive around people, always her magic. That night, she glowed, laughing too loudly, touching people's arms as she talked, including Logan's. I'd heard his name before, a client, she mentioned in meetings, rebranding a startup. But watching them that night, the way she leaned into him, touched his arm, it wasn't business. I didn't say anything, not yet. The car ride home was brutal. Rachel staring out the window like we'd just left a yoga retreat. Not a social minefield. And I gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. That kiss? I said, voice low, measured, and she didn't flinch, didn't turn her head. What kiss? You know which one, Logan? She scoffed softly like I was boring her. It was a dare. You're being dramatic, and I turned my eyes back to the road, my mouth tasting like rust. You kissed him. For 11 seconds, I said. She laughed, dry, dismissive. Are you timing me now? And that's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry, not even close. She was amused. You're blowing this way out of proportion. She said, I didn't sleep with him. It's not like I cheated. That word hanging in the air, unspoken but fully implied. And I didn't answer because somewhere in that silence something broke and I didn't even know what it was yet. We pulled into the apartment parking lot and I just sat there. Engine ticking, hands still on the wheel like I was mid-turn, mid-thought, mid-something I couldn't name. Rachel opened the door without another word. Her heels clicking on the pavement as she walked away from me like we hadn't just unraveled in the car. And I didn't follow her immediately. I stayed there another 5 minutes. Maybe more, not to calm down. I wasn't angry in the traditional sense. I was just stunned. Like I'd been in a car crash only the airbag never deployed. Sitting in the quiet aftermath trying to understand what had hit me. The apartment felt colder than usual. Rachel already in bed, back to me. Scrolling through her phone with the blue light glowing across her face. Looking like a stranger under that light. Like someone too far away to reach. I didn't speak, didn't get in the bed, just went to the bathroom, turned the faucet. Splashed water on my face like that could reset me somehow. But my reflection stared back unchanged. Same haircut, same eyes, same man, though. Something inside had shifted, and that night I lay beside her and didn't sleep. Not even a little. My mind spinning, every thought orbiting the same center. The same brutal, inescapable fact. She didn't care, not about the kiss, not about the moment, not about how I felt. And if she didn't care, then what was I still doing here? By morning I'd made a decision. If she wanted this to be a game, fine, but I wasn't going to keep playing as the fool who kept folding. She wanted casual, wanted to laugh off everything serious like it was all just banter. Then I'd show her exactly how cold detachment looked when it wasn't coming from her side. The next weekend we were at Greg's again. Another game night, couples wine, predictable playlists. Rachel in rare form, telling stories too loudly, leaning too far toward Logan, laughing like she hadn't burned down our last conversation. But I wasn't watching her. I was watching Sophie, who had always been around, Rachel's longtime friend, kind, observant, the one asking how you really were when no one else cared, remembering birthdays, bringing extra snacks for people with allergies, the kind of person who didn't try to fill silence and respected it. I found her by the kitchen island. Sipping whiskey from a small glass, still a bourbon girl, I asked. She looked up surprised and smiled. You remembered? Hard to forget. I said, voice easy. She laughed low and genuine, the kind of laugh you don't fake. We talked, nothing scandalous, just talked about work, her new role in the city, her hesitations about the move, her hopes, and I listened, really listened, asked questions with weight, and every time Sophie smiled I felt Rachel's eyes flick toward us. Every time Sophie leaned in. Rachel shifted in her chair across the room. I didn't gloat, didn't put on a show, but I also didn't stop. Eventually Rachel came over, too polished, too smiley. You two look cozy, she said, eyes locked on Sophie. Sophie smiled coolly. Noah was just telling me how much he appreciates digital design. Who knew? I shrugged. You spend enough time with a designer. Some of it rubs off. Rachel's laugh brittle. Off? Maybe you can design my next logo then. He? I looked at her unreadable. I think you already have plenty of volunteers. She blinked. Just a second but enough. Sophie excused herself soon after. Though not before giving me a look, curious, thoughtful, and I didn't feel guilty, not one bit. And at home that night Rachel was quieter than usual, didn't mention Sophie, didn't ask about the conversation. But I caught her watching me through the mirror as I brushed my teeth, her eyes scanning me like I was a book she hadn't finished and wasn't sure she liked anymore. And in that silence, something became clear. I didn't talk to Sophie because I was trying to cheat. I talked to her because it was the first time in weeks that Rachel actually seemed to feel something. She'd grown so used to me being predictable, soft, reachable, and now she couldn't read me. That spark I saw in her eye wasn't affection. It was fear, and fear meant she still had something to lose, The next weekend brought another gathering. This time a backyard party with string lights, melting coolers, cheap beer, and early 2000s pop songs crackling through someone's half-dead Bluetooth speaker. Comfortable, predictable, Rachel wore the red dress. The one she saved for nights when she wanted every man in the room to notice her, especially one. Logan was already there, of course, and she beelined to him like gravity pulled her. I walked in, nodded at a few people, claimed a spot by the fire pit, and waited. Sophie arrived 15 minutes later, hair damp like she'd just stepped out of a hot shower, cheeks flushed from the night air. She found me by the fire, said hey while brushing ash off the bench before sitting beside me, said she didn't think she'd make it, and I told her I was glad she did, and we talked again, nothing explicit, just real, easy conversation, not romantic but intimate. Like we both understood the rules and neither of us wanted to break them yet. Then someone said it, truth or dare, of course they did. The group circled up fast, chairs dragged close. Drinks topped off, and I ended up sitting directly across from Rachel, perched in her lawn chair like a queen holding court. Sophie beside me, quiet and calm. The dares started harmless, hot sauce, dumb texts, easy laughs, until it was Rachel's turn. She didn't hesitate, said my name with eyes gleaming and asked truth or dare. I chose dare without flinching. Kiss someone, not me, she said casually but with an edge I knew well. So I turned to Sophie without waiting or explaining and kissed her. Not a showy peck or a polite party kiss but a real one. Waited. Sophie didn't pull away. She kissed me back slow and warm and steady, and when we parted she whispered just for me, let's do that again sometime. I leaned back and looked at Rachel and saw her mask slip just enough, the twitch at her mouth, fingers tightening on her cup, the smile too wide, too practiced, the laugh too loud and sharp. But it didn't matter because the damage was done and I wasn't finished. I didn't look at Rachel again that night, didn't need to, kept my arm along the back of Sophie's chair, kept my voice light and my laughter honest, not loud or performative. And every so often I felt Rachel's attention prickling the back of my neck like static. Not because I was trying to provoke her. That part was over. I wasn't playing anymore. Later as people drifted inside to refill drinks and pick at leftovers, Rachel cornered me alone in the kitchen while I rinsed a glass under warm water, stepping in behind me. Like she was staging a scene, saying it was cute while twirling ice in her cup, asking what that little performance was, her tone trying to stay light but cracking, asking if I really wanted a reaction, and I didn't turn around, just set the glass down and dried my hands, telling her I was playing the same game she did. She stepped closer, voice dropping, said I didn't even like Sophie like that, and I smiled before answering, asking if she was sure, and there it was, the flinch she tried to hide behind whatever expression she'd rehearsed all night. The moment the script fell apart and she realized she wasn't directing the scene anymore, I walked out before she could respond, knowing from then on I had the upper hand. Not because I was manipulating her but because I'd finally stopped clinging. That kiss, the spark in Sophie's eye, the lightness in my chest, it wasn't just payback. It was proof I could still feel something that didn't orbit pain. But that wasn't the end or even the climax. That came a week later at another party. This one at a lake house. More drinking, more fake laughter, more pretending, Rachel unusually quiet. Which if you knew her was blaring alarms, not embarrassed but calculating and tense. Sticking close to Logan, every touch lingering, every laugh too loud. Yet no one was really watching him, everyone was watching her, watching me, and Sophie and I weren't being obvious. No hand-holding, no whispering in corners, but our energy was different, calmer, closer, and we didn't need to perform because the air around us did that for us. And it didn't take long before Rachel snapped. We were all back near the fire pit with marshmallows going around and someone tossing out another dumb dare. Everyone laughing until Rachel's voice cut through the night like a slap. Why don't you two just get a room already? And everything went silent as I looked at her slowly and said, "Excuse me, you heard me," she hissed, stepping closer. "Is this your big move, Noah? Flirting with my best friend like some teenager? You think this is clever?" Sophie shifted beside me, clearly stunned. "You dared me to kiss someone." I reminded her. "You kissed her like it meant something," Rachel shouted. "You humiliated me." All eyes were on us now. Conversation stopped and even the fire seemed to burn quieter. I kept my voice level and asked, "Didn't you do the same back at Greg's with Logan?" "That was different," she snapped. "How?" Silence. Then she snapped again louder. "You're pathetic, Noah. You think one kiss changes anything. You think that makes you a man. You've been sleepwalking through this marriage for years." It stung, eh? Little but not in the way she wanted, because this time I didn't feel small. I felt anchored. Maybe I was sleepwalking, I said. But at least I wasn't pretending to be happy while kissing someone else behind my partner's back. She blinked, chest heaving, a vein pulsing near her temple. Then without another word she spun on her heel and stormed inside the house. The screen door banging shut behind her loud and final. No one said anything, and they didn't need to. That was the night the mask cracked. All the way through, people started talking again, louder than usual, trying to shake the awkwardness, while I stayed put, feeling the heat from the fire and the cold of what had just happened swirl in my chest. I wasn't proud, but I wasn't ashamed either. I wasn't anything really. Just done. I waited, gave it time. Enough time to make it clear I wasn't following her out of guilt or need. Waited until the energy settled back into its usual hum and people stopped staring. Then I stood and walked away. From the group, the lake glittering in the distance, calm and dark as I passed the dock, the picnic tables, the quiet edge of the house, and found myself near the guest cabins. One porch light faint and yellow. I don't know what made me check or if I was expecting anything. Maybe I hoped I was wrong. But the door wasn't locked, and the second it opened I knew I wasn't. I heard the laugh first, low, familiar, smug, Logan, then I saw them. Rachel in the bed, tangled in sheets, her back bare, hair chaotic across the pillow, Logan propped on one elbow, completely unapologetic. Hey buddy, he grinned. Didn't know we had an audience. Time froze. My fist clenched before I could stop it. I crossed the room in 2 steps and hit him once, twice. The second time his nose broke with a sharp crack and a rush of blood. Rachel screamed, scrambling off the bed, wrapping herself in a sheet that barely covered her as she grabbed my arm and begged Noah stop, and I did. Pulling back, breathing hard, hands trembling, Logan groaned, still smiling through it. The bastard. Rachel's eyes wild as she gasped. It meant nothing, I swear. But I didn't care, not about her apologies, her panic, or the regret that only showed up once the damage was done. I turned and walked out without slamming the door or saying a word, just left. Outside the air felt cleaner, sharper. The kind that lets you breathe all the way down, and for the first time in months I did. Every step back to the main house shedding weight as my shoulders dropped and jaw unclenched. I wasn't angry, I wasn't hurt, I was free. Inside the house had gone mostly quiet, whispers in corners, people glancing up then quickly away, no one asking where I'd been. Maybe they knew or didn't want to. I went to our room and packed slowly, deliberately, only what mattered, each folded shirt a small decision. Each pair of socks a reminder that I was choosing this now, not her. I couldn't stop what she did, but I could decide how I responded, and I chose silence. She didn't follow right away, not until my bag was over my shoulder and my hand on the door. Then I heard no wait. I turned to see her at the end of the hall, still wrapped in that same crumpled sheet like a costume she hadn't taken off. Face pale, voice shaking. Please, it didn't mean anything. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I cut in and said, you never think because you never believe there'll be consequences. She stepped closer, desperate, saying, you can't just walk away from this. From everything, and I tilted my head and asked, you mean from the marriage where you kissed my friend in front of everyone, or the one where I found you in his bed? She recoiled like I'd slapped her. Noah, please. You broke it, I said quietly, and the worst part is you knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think I'd ever stop caring, and I walked past her out the door and didn't look back. The screen door closed behind me with a weight that felt final. It didn't slam. It didn't rattle. It just shut like the last page of a book you never planned to reread. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the car. I didn't rush. I didn't feel the cold. Everything inside me had already gone still. By the time I opened the driver's door, my hands were steady. I sat down, closed it softly, and stared through the windshield at the shadowy trees, my reflection in the glass. I didn't recognize the man looking back, but I trusted him. He didn't look broken. He looked finished. The drive home was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo, it absorbs. The city was still asleep when I got back. That narrow pre-dawn window where even the streetlights seemed to whisper. I carried my bag inside and dropped it by the door. The apartment smelled like dust and something faintly sweet. Maybe her perfume lingering on the blanket tossed over the couch. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I didn't go to bed, didn't shower, didn't even change. I just sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, staring at the coffee table like it might offer answers. The remote, a water glass, a half-dead plant we'd forgotten to water. Ordinary. Like the universe hadn't just flipped upside down. When the sun started bleeding through the blinds, I walked to the hallway closet, opened the small safe under the coats, pulled out the folder I never thought I'd need. Divorce papers. Printed months ago, when things first felt brittle. I'd never filled them out. It had felt like tempting fate, like keeping a fire extinguisher in your car because you noticed smoke under the hood. Now it felt like the only rational thing I'd ever done. I set them on the kitchen table, picked up a pen, and started writing. Name, date, grounds, irreconcilable differences. The pen didn't shake. My hand didn't hesitate. Halfway through the first page, there was a knock. 3 soft taps. I didn't get up right away. Didn't need to look through the peephole. I opened the door. Rachel stood there. Same clothes, hair tied in a loose knot, mascara smudged, eyes red and puffy. She looked like someone who hadn't slept. Someone who'd cried too hard and didn't know how to stop. Noah, she said. Her voice cracked just saying my name. I didn't respond. I just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. And the truth was, she didn't. I shouldn't have done it, she started, biting her lip hard. I was selfish. I was drunk. I was stupid and angry. I didn't say a word, just turned back to the table and continued filling out the paperwork. She saw the forms and stopped mid-sentence. Her voice broke into a whisper. Noah, what is this? You know what it is. Please don't. Her voice trembled. We can fix this. We've been through hard stuff before. I finally looked up. No, we haven't. She sat down across from me like her knees gave out. I made a mistake, she said again. No, I replied. You made a decision. She swallowed, eyes glistening. You don't have to forgive me. Just don't stop loving me. That part hurt, not because it made me waver, but because of how familiar it once would have sounded. There was a time when I would have grabbed her hand just for saying it. A time when that sentence could have undone every bruise between us. But that time had passed. I'm not angry, I said. She blinked, surprised. I'm just done. You played with fire, Rachel, and you called it freedom. Her bottom lip quivered. I slid the papers into a folder and stood. She didn't follow me. Not yet. She just sat there in the chair we used to argue over who got the bigger slice of pizza, now looking small in it, like a guest in a place that no longer felt like home. I walked down the hall, past our bedroom, past the framed memories nailed into the drywall, each one feeling like a lie someone else told me. Every photo, every note on the fridge, every shared toothbrush. It all belonged to a version of us that didn't survive. I heard her voice again, soft, cracked. Noah. I stopped. She stood there, hands clenched like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. You don't have to say anything else, she said. I know what I did. I know how bad it was. I just needed to see you one last time to know what I destroyed. I nodded slowly. You want forgiveness? She didn't answer, but the words sat between us like a question too ashamed to be spoken. I walked closer, not close enough to touch, just enough to see her fully. I don't hate you, I said. She inhaled sharply. But I don't believe you anymore. She blinked hard. A tear slipped down her cheek. You didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because afterward, when I stood there, you shrugged. That's what stayed. Not the kiss. Not even the bed. The way you looked at me like it wasn't worth fixing. Her hands went to her face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm not coming back, I said. Because what we had, it's not something I can want again. It's something I survived. She nodded, tears streaking down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered one last time. I know. I opened the door, and she stood there for a few seconds like maybe there was one more line left to say, but there wasn't. So she stepped out and I didn't watch her go, not out of cruelty but peace. And that afternoon I met Sophie at a small cafe near the park where she was already sitting outside with sunlight catching her hair and a pair of sunglasses balanced on her head. And when she saw me she smiled and asked if everything was okay, and for the first time in a long time I told the truth and said yeah, it finally is, because there's something strange about the way healing starts. It's never loud or sudden. There's no orchestral swell or moment where your heart leaps and says this is it. I'm better now. It's quieter than that. Softer. Like waking up one morning and realizing the ache didn't beat you to consciousness. Like standing in your kitchen and truly noticing that your hands have stopped shaking when you reach for the coffee. And after that lunch with Sophie, we didn't rush anything, no confessions, no impulsive late-night calls, no candlelit moments full of tension and half-spoken longing. Just check-ins through text or over coffee or sitting on opposite ends of a park bench talking about nothing that mattered. And somehow that felt like everything and exactly what I needed. 2 weeks passed and one evening I found myself at her place for the first time. A small apartment above a bakery with windows open and faint cinnamon in the air. Cozy in a way. That had nothing to prove. Books stacked on the floor, a half-solved puzzle on the table. A cat named Theodore watching me like I'd interrupted his private hour. And we sat on the couch close but not quite touching while a movie played that neither of us paid attention to. Something about sitting next to her making the noise around us fade not dramatically but like a dimmer switch lowering the world just enough. And she sipped her wine and looked at me sideways and said she hadn't had someone just sit with her like that in a long time, and I told her she seemed like someone people don't walk away from, and she smiled faintly and said they don't. She just stopped gripping too tightly, and that stayed with me. And later after the wine was gone and the credits rolled on a movie we couldn't name, her knee brushed mine and neither of us moved. No rush, no hunger, just quiet presence. Until she rested her head on my shoulder and I closed my eyes not from tiredness but peace. And when I stood to leave she walked me to the door and hesitated for a second before looking up. And I said not yet gently and she nodded with no sadness in her eyes. Just grace. And back at my apartment something felt different. Not dramatic or spiritual, just easier. And I passed the kitchen table where the folder with the signed divorce papers still sat unopened since Rachel left, and I glanced at them and then at the window where the skyline blinked back at me, and I didn't feel urgency or rage anymore. Just stillness, and Rachel hadn't reached out since that day. No texts, no calls, nothing, and maybe that silence was her final apology or her way of holding on to control. But either way it didn't matter anymore because it didn't hurt or echo. It was just gone. And the next morning I brewed coffee without thinking and sat by the window in the early light with steam rising from the mug as the world began to hum. My phone buzzing with a message from Sophie saying she hoped I woke up to something good, and I looked at it for a long moment before smiling without meaning to and replying that I did. And a week later on another Saturday after a long walk through the park with earbuds in and my mind drifting. Plans with Sophie later for nothing special like lunch or a used bookstore or maybe the Arboretum. Because that was the point. I turned my key and opened the door to find Rachel sitting on the edge of the couch like a statue carved out of guilt with hunched shoulders, clasped hands, glassy eyes, standing when she saw me and saying hi, and I didn't answer, just set my keys down and hung my jacket. Not asking how she got in because I knew she still had a spare and that was on me. And she said she wouldn't stay long and needed to say it to my face. And I leaned against the counter with my arms crossed and asked say what. And she took a shaky breath and said what she did with Logan broke something and she felt it snap the second it happened. And I stayed silent as she admitted she thought she could be reckless for one night and chase a feeling she thought she was missing but lit a match she couldn't put out. That she didn't just burn us but burned the one person who never left her. And she looked down with shaking hands and added that she'd been going to therapy trying to understand why she destroys good things and needs chaos to feel alive. And said she thought she knew now. I raised an eyebrow. Because I never felt in control, she said. And you were always so steady, so sure. I think I wanted to shake it, to see if I could break it. And when I did, I realized what I lost. I looked at her, not with hatred, not with sadness, just clarity. You want forgiveness? She nodded once. Yes. And what happens if I give it to you? She looked confused, like the question had caught her off guard. Do you think we go back to how it was? I asked. Do you think it erases the way you looked me in the eye after that night and acted like none of it mattered? No, she said softly. But maybe it lets you move on. And maybe it lets me stop hating myself. I stepped closer, not close enough to comfort, just enough to make sure every word landed. I don't hate you, Rachel. She blinked fast, surprised. I just don't believe you. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. You didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because afterward, when I stood there, you shrugged. Her face crumpled. One hand went to her mouth as tears spilled freely. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not coming back. What I had with you, it's not something I want again. It's something I survived. She nodded slowly, shoulders trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered one last time. I know. I opened the door. She stood there a moment, like she might say something else, but she didn't. She stepped out into the hallway, and I didn't follow. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Not a slam, not a bang, just a sound with no return. I stood there for a second, hand still on the knob, feeling the boundary between what was and what was no more. Then I turned away, walked back inside, and let the silence settle. But the silence was different. Not the kind I'd sat in weeks ago that buzzed in your ears and made your own breathing feel too loud. This silence was calm, still, like the inside of a cathedral after everyone has gone home. A few hours later, I met Sophie for lunch. She was already there, sunglasses on the edge of her nose, flipping through a second-hand novel while waiting. When I sat down, she looked up and tilted her head slightly. Everything okay? She asked gently, not with pressure, not with expectation, just concern from someone watching another learn to stand again. Yeah, I said. It finally is. We talked about her new project, a local gallery exhibit she wanted to see, the weird weather shift, and the bakery across from her building that started selling matcha croissants. It wasn't electric or poetic. It was real. And that was enough. Later, walking down the street, she pointed out a bookstore I'd never noticed. We ducked inside. She disappeared into the non-fiction section while I browsed used paperbacks, thumbs tracing cracked spines and yellowed pages that smelled like memory. At the register, we met back, each with a book in hand. Mine was about architecture and forgotten cities. Hers was poetry. She smiled when she saw my choice. Looks like you're finally starting to rebuild. Maybe I was. That night, back at my place, I sat at the kitchen table alone. The folder still lay where I left it. Divorce papers signed, sealed, final. I'd call a lawyer Monday or Tuesday. No rush. There was no need to hurry endings when beginnings had already started to grow. I glanced at my phone. No missed calls, no unread messages. Rachel had kept her promise, or her distance. For the first time, it didn't feel like a power play or a tactic. It felt like acceptance. Distance felt good. The next morning, I woke early, brewed coffee, didn't check my phone, didn't feel the pull to stare at a screen waiting for something to make me feel real. I stepped onto the balcony, mug in hand, watching the city wake in soft gold-tinted waves. My phone buzzed once. Sophie. No text, just a photo. A sunrise, a different angle, her apartment's view, same sky. That was the whole point. We weren't saving each other. We were just learning to exist under the same sun again. Later that week, we met for dinner. No small talk. After dessert, she looked at me and said, "If this is just friendship, I'm good with that. But if it's more, I want it slow. No expectations, no rebound labels. Just real." I nodded. I want whatever it's meant to be. No pressure, just truth. She smiled, not relief, but agreement. We walked back to her place, stopped at her door. No kiss, no invite, just a pause. And that pause said everything. "Take your time," she whispered. "But don't stand still for too long. You deserve to move again." I drove home feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Not euphoria, not butterflies, just peace. Weeks passed, then months. Rachel never reached out again. No surprise visits, no cryptic messages. A friend mentioned she'd moved out of the city, taken a job somewhere upstate. I didn't dig deeper. I didn't need to. What happened between us would never be undone, but it also wouldn't be relived. That part of my life had its ending, and this was whatever came after the credits. Sophie and I grew closer slowly, steadily. Nothing explosive. No declarations, just presents, books shared, meals cooked, walks through familiar neighborhoods that began to feel new with her beside me. One night, while we were cleaning up dinner, she asked, "Do you regret any of it?" "The past?" "No," I said. Not anymore. Because even the ugliest things in life leave behind clarity. And clarity, if you're lucky, becomes peace. She nodded, poured more wine, and we sat on the couch again just like that first night. Her head on my shoulder, my eyes closed, the world turning gently around us, not burning anymore, not crashing, just turning. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was turning with it.